want to welcome everyone to Memoir Fest 2021. I'm Geraldine Voris, your host for today's event, and I can say that I'm honored to have been asked to do so. I'm an instructor in the Department of Health, Aging, and Society, and my students and I were fortunate enough to be partnered with the Intergenerational Memoir project this year. Ellen had sent an email to our department and asked if there might be any interest in speaking to a project of this type. The chair had the email forwarded to me, and as they say, the rest is history. The experience of this project has been more than enlightening and informative. Erickson's 8 stages of development begin with infancy and ends with the late adulthood. Those 55 years of age and up. Suffice it to say that the final developmental stage of late adulthood is said to be the period during which aging adults reflect on their lives and evaluate their successes and missteps, their fortunes, their misfortunes. Given our partnership in the Memoir project, we have had the opportunity to help facilitate the writing and journaling of these events with our senior partners. The takeaway from this exercise has been life-changing for many of our students. They report a high regard for the trusting relationship that they've forged, a deep respect for the friendships that they've nurtured, and an overwhelming appreciation for the inspiration and the wisdom shared by their senior partners. For the students, there's one major recurring observation, and that is the resilience in life demonstrated by the senior partners. This has been most encouraging and valuable to this younger generation, particularly during this COVID time. The students and I thank our senior partners for their sincere and authentic sharing of their heartfelt life experiences. In addition, we would like to thank Ellen and Stephanie in particular. Both have been instrumental in establishing and putting into practice this intergenerational memoir project. Before we begin the sharing of the collection of memoirs, I'd like to ask Ellen to say a few words about the E. Mary Bizzell Award and announce the recipient for 2021. Ellen, if you would be so kind.
Thank you, Geraldine. I'm honored to announce the establishment of the Hamilton Aging and Community Award for Enhancing Resilient Aging, which is inspired by and recognizes Mary Bizzell's enormous contributions to supporting resilient aging of older adults in our community. We can have the new slide. Here today, and a founding member of Aging Together, Mary Bizzell is an individual who has influenced people's lives locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally. She is a teacher, a clinician, and an advocate whose life and work exemplify excellence, commitment, and caring. Mary's work in the area of caring for life and health, particularly older and vulnerable individuals, spans 6 decades and crosses many disciplines. She has worked tirelessly to develop and disseminate knowledge and skills related to enhancing the lives of vulnerable people. Mary has promoted the concepts of personhood, hope, and interdependence for resilient aging in the community. As she says, hope is, quote, helping each other explore every opportunity, unquote. And we all need that hope at every stage in life. In 2001, Mary was awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws degree from McMaster University. And 10 years ago, she was recognized by the Canadian Gerontology Association and received the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. And we dare to add our small honor to her record. Each year, this award will be given to a member of the Hamilton community who reflects the spirit of Mary Bizzell by fostering resilience among older adults in our community. And as you see on the certificate, It's my pleasure to announce that this year's recipient of the award for enhancing resilient aging is our own Stephanie Wickens. Stephanie's academic abilities, her specific research interests, her learning and volunteer experiences make her an excellent first recipient of this award. Stephanie will be graduating in the fall from McMaster University in the honors program in aging and health. She has demonstrated strong interest in developing community support to improve the aging experience, particularly by designing and facilitating arts-based activities with older adults, including this intergenerational memoir project. For 2 years, she has also led the Hamilton Aging and Community Project for intergenerational card making, in which grandparents brought grandchildren to the library to make greeting cards together. And I'm sure we can look forward to that program beginning again once libraries are functioning in their normal way. Stephanie has a genuine interest in focusing her graduate research on the efficacy of arts-based intergenerational communication and connections for building individual and community resilience. Stephanie's community contributions, artistic talents, academic achievements, and her genuine passion for promoting resilience through innovation make her an ideal recipient of the Hamilton Aging and Community Award for enhancing resilient aging. Congratulations, Stephanie. Mary Bazell would like to make a brief comment. Are you there, Mary? Oh, I guess we'll just go on then.
Okay, thank you very much, Ellen. And congratulations, Stephanie, well done. Stephanie was a student of mine, and I can tell you she's very deserving, hard worker, dedicated, sincere. So now for the memoir selections. We'll begin with our first presentation by Anne Ferguson, and the title is I Was Born in Glasgow During the Bombing.
Okay, right.
Should we start now?
Yep.
I was born in Glasgow, Scotland during the bombing by the Germans in 1941 in the tenements in Maryhill. My family consisted of my mum, my dad, and 5 siblings. We lived in a tenement flat which had 1 bedroom and 1 kitchen with no toilet or shower. The Blitz started on March the 13th, 1941. My mum was looking out the tenement window that night at the German bombers flying overhead. She saw a bomb heading for our tenement, but a big gust of Glasgow wind carried it over the building. It hit the tenements in the next 2 streets, that's Kilmun Street and Duncroon Street. They were destroyed. 83 people were killed and 180 people were injured that night. Other bombs also destroyed our Catholic school and Catholic church. This area of Glasgow was an important target as it had shipyards which the Germans wished to destroy. My mother often spoke about this, as well as telling us stories about the damage caused to other residents in the tenements. Within a few weeks, she had to be in hospital to deliver me. My 5 siblings, all under the age of 9 years of age, were sent to our grandparents who lived nearby. They already had 12 kids of their own, so they were not too happy about getting landed with another 5 kids to support. My father just got called up at this time, so he saw me once in hospital before going off to the Navy. My mother and siblings spoke often throughout the years about this time in their lives. It was not until I had my first child in Canada that I understood what a difficult time this was for my parents and siblings. They had to cope with a shortage of food, overcrowded living conditions, the loss of friends who died in the bombing, the fear of more German planes flying over Glasgow, the fear of losing our dad in the war, the fear of mental damage caused by bombs, fear of being left widowed and homeless, as well as the fear of losing your children to the bombs. Whenever my siblings get together, we always speak about this time in our lives. The stories are really burned into our brains. How difficult life was for all of the families involved in the war. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Our second memoir is by Selena Bajorek, entitled Dear Best Grandchildren, and it's read by Alicia Hall.
Everyone. Selena wants to say hello to everyone, and she's sorry that she couldn't be online today, but I'll be reading for her. My dear grandchildren, I hope that you have had an opportunity to read the stories about my life. It has occurred to me that I should tell you why I have written these stories for you. Every parent has a hope that they have passed their values and wisdoms on to the next generation. Since no one knows how long we have on this earth, I am hoping that, peradventure, I do not meet all of you, my stories will give you a sense of the person I have become. In the event that I have not clearly described life's lessons and strategies for overcoming life's difficulties, here is a brief summary. At the same time, while life shapes who we are, our biology is also a contributing factor. For example, I believe that I inherited my dad's intelligence and my mom's charm and winning personality. It is exciting to contemplate the variety of traits and gifts that my grandchildren may have. The little boy that my daughter is carrying may inherit his dad's amazing memory or his Uncle Nicholas's intuition. You may have the artistic gift that your Aunt Crystal possesses. I hope that your grandfather's sense of humor is passed down into your DNA. If I had a choice to pass on a gift from my unique DNA, it would simply be my ability to empathize with people who are experiencing hard times. Life will give you lots of opportunity to learn those strategies that will contribute to living your life to the best of your ability. Always remember to treat others as you would like to be treated. This is not easy as it sounds because some people will be very annoying or even intimidating. Secondly, always give your best effort to absolutely everything that you do. This includes everything from cleaning your room to studying for an exam. Read as much as you can. Books hold all of the wisdom that you will ever need. Stay open-minded to others, especially if they have opinions that are contrary to yours. Take every opportunity that arises to do something kind for another human being. Do everything that you can to heal and protect the planet. And finally, never hesitate to ask help for whether you ask God as you might understand God or ask another person who you respect. Life will have its inevitable trials and tribulations, and always remember that there are many others dealing with difficulties far more overwhelming than what you are dealing with. During those hard times, family and friends will give you the support to overcome any hardships. In addition, teachers have proved to be an oncoming source of support and wisdom. It was a grade 11 math teacher who told me that my grades were not an accurate indication of my intelligence. In fact, it was my chaotic family life that most likely did not provide the quiet and calm environment to allow me to study. And eventually, when I entered nursing school and later university, I realized that I loved studying and I excelled at it. I met Professor Ellen Ryan at McMaster University, and she taught me more about myself than I could ever imagine. She taught me the value of my life's experiences, especially the coping skills and insight that accompanied the loss of my eyesight. Live well, dearest grandchildren. With all of my love and affection, Grandmama. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Our next presentation is by Rachelle Sender, and it's entitled Gratitude.
Okay. That's a picture of my parents on their wedding day. And this is, gratitude. I am grateful for winning the birth lottery. Had I been born in Krakow in 1938, instead of in New York City in 1946, I would almost certainly have perished in a concentration camp along with my parents. My older brother, who was born in Poland in 1938, did die as an infant, although the cause was not murder, but sudden infant death. In the perverted calculus of war and genocide, perhaps that was a blessing. In retrospect, I am grateful to my parents, especially my father, for having the strength, wisdom, and optimism to leave Poland 2 months before the Nazi invasion to travel to England and then Brazil, and finally to start a new life in New York, where I was born in safety and comfort. I do not know, will never know, what it cost my parents to give me such a life. I do know how hard my father worked 6 days a week at his office in the garment district, coming home late every night. He rarely spoke of the past, of his dead mother. He did enjoy life, jokes, theater, dining out, and singing love songs in German. My mother was more somber and stressed. She spoke often of the past and hovered anxiously over me, more understandable after I learned later about my dead brother and another that was stillborn. My mother requalified as a physician after they came to New York City and completed a residency in pathology. 3 times a week after work, she visited her psychoanalyst, who is doubtless also a European Jewish refugee. I may be grateful now, but as a child, I was not particularly. Of course, I had everything I needed. I was safe, warm, and well fed, but I always felt torn between 2 worlds and 2 sets of values. On one hand, the Jewish European refugee world, where leaving food on your plate was frowned on, and having more than 2 school dresses was considered excessive. On the other hand, the affluent American milieu of the 1950s of abundance and wealth. There was the pressure to do well academically, which I could and did, and the pressure to have lots of friends and be happy, since why wouldn't I be after all my parents had been through, which I was less successful at. Later, there was the pressure to have a career and get married and produce grandchildren quickly, as my father had been born in 1902, so he was getting on. In the end, it's hard to be grateful for stuff that did not happen to you, for not being called a dirty Jew, for not being on intimate terms with death, for not fearing that Cossacks might pour out of the 81st Street subway stop. I still do miss my parents, though I am grateful that both, unlike my grandparents, died at an old age and in their own comfortable beds. And now, as I approach an older age myself, I am grateful for the life they gave me, the education, the love of the outdoors, the money to buy our first house. Most of all, the ability to love and be loved, to nurture another generation as they nurtured me. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachelle. Thank you very much. Our next reader is Joan Robertson, and her memoir is entitled, He Chose Me. Is Joan there?
Joan, you're muted.
Sorry, how silly. I'll start again. He chose me. Echoes of Good Friday sink into my psyche. He chose me. Under a tree there, would he propose? Here, where we first locked eyes? But no moonlight night or poignant place could ever have predicted when he chose me. The doctor asked, "Are you engaged?" My body stiffened. My voice uttered, "No." Pregnancy stops the bleeding if you don't want to lose your last ovary. Emotions swirl. I rush back to tell John. My face flushes, my heart palpitates. I wait at the edge of the tennis court. He walks towards me. My head tells me my chances for marriage are over. He has to know. You tell the one you love that you are damaged goods, that dreams are dashed, that you understand when he says, "I'm so sorry." And then what? Prepare for nothing but the truth, even if it hurts. You tell the one you love, God weeps. In the midday sun, beside the tennis court, barren of trees, he chose me to be his wife. And now, when dementia stalks, dreams are dashed, and loss becomes an invisible companion, I choose him.
Oh, lovely, Joan. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Ken Watson, and his entry here is entitled Resilience.
Right. Are we on screen? I don't.
No, we're not on screen, but
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. A wag tells me resilience is deferred denial. I think of it as an end run. He was trying to score points for the cynicism that beset him. I found it pointed to a wider horizon. He was shrinking almost as I watched. I felt I was swelling like oat flakes in the porridge pot. When I walked into retirement, I carried a to-do list as long as my arm. Things that had been put on a back burner for 35 years were stacked like pots in a sink. Most of the contents were cold and badly spoiled, but as I cleaned them out and one by one, they flickered back to the interest each had once been. Now, with time to indulge them, each could be re-examined, so that took care of a decade or two. Those were the reasons to get up in the morning, to delay bedtime. There was so much else in the world to be interested in. What I had not expected was that each of these topics was not a loop, but a chord. And the strings began to weave together. So the big garden morphed into a small vertical one because of the carpentry skills and tools. The sewing skills turned into a quilting project where people talked about their ancestry. Singing in the church choir grew into a place in an opera chorus where you were expected to bring baking to share at break time. Another surprise I hadn't counted on was the once practiced and perfected, each of those bands woven from a few skills could themselves become strands in something bigger. Strips woven on a narrow loom could become a tapestry. I'd never really thought about it before. Playing all those interesting activities was fun enough. And then I started to write things down. The genealogy project demanded scribe skills that I'd never learned. Mistakes in text typed on a word processor are easy to fix nowadays, and my typing is better than when I failed it in grade 9. The stories of my ancestry accumulated to the point where I needed help with the next step. I needed a mentor to sort through the assembled stuff. When you don't have much capital in the risk bank, it's a big step to bet it all on a single decision. I think that's what friends are for. Support in those moments. They see you through the minor to the major. So my stories went to kind guides with skills I needed to know. I was encouraged. I was asked to do a short public reading. I was astounded. Put them into print, someone suggested. So with my risk bank dividends, I bought the time of an outsider to answer my questions about story quality and possibilities. Never was a historical fiction fan till I read this, was her verdict. But you can't punctuate for beans. On the day she called to say I had an ISBN number, the sun stopped in the sky. So for me, resilience is a new land to be discovered every morning. It renews every day. Everyone can reach out of themselves if those about them make it a small risk. Humanity is what cultures resilience within ourselves and between ourselves. Resilience for me is not a behavior, but a process, both personal and social. Resilience is the coat of arms of successful society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Our next reader is Lori Dessau, and the title of her memoir is I Didn't Know, 1 Year of Life Without Lou.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Well, when my husband, Louis Tauber, died suddenly, August 3rd, 2019, I started writing down thoughts and feelings about how I was grieving and about my new reality, which I called Life After Lou. And all at once, I imagined one line at the top of each page, starting with, I didn't know. And I left the rest of the page blank, not for a drawing of mine, but my husband was a clinical psychologist, an author, a collector, and also a collage artist. So I imagined immediately matching one of his collages with my words. And I think honestly, over this whole year, that this would have remained a lovely idea, but not a reality, if I hadn't received an email from Ellen Ryan about a McMaster memoir project. And if I hadn't met my student, Rianne Leslie. Working with Rianne empowered me to make the project actually happen. Each week, we looked at my text and we found collages from my husband's collage website that fit the words. Then my son Charles transformed this into a book, and here it is. This is, so we'll just stop for a minute. The cover picture that we saw was, if we could just go back to it just for a second. I just liked that because it wasn't a posed photo. It was a picture of Lou and I sitting together looking at collages on my iPad. So I thought, okay, this works. Thanks, Jasminder. And then the next slide is a picture that I just particularly like of Lou and I on our way to my niece's wedding. So it just gives an idea of the two of us together. And there's another slide. There's one in between here, Jasminder, if you have. There's one going back that has some text, but if you don't have it, that's fine. We can just go back one. So I can just show an idea of what the book looked like. So this was the first slide. I didn't know. So everyone starts with I didn't know. I didn't know you could miss someone this much. And we picked this collage because Lou actually put himself in it. So I thought that was kind of cool. And he's surrounded by books, which he loves. There are thousands of books in our house. So I didn't know you could miss someone this much. And then the next slide. I didn't know that everyone's grieving is exactly the same and completely different. And you'll see we chose a kind of surreal collage there with Dolly because the whole experience of grieving can feel like a surreal one. So that was that image. And the third one, I didn't know you could drown without water. This was a tough one, but Rianne helped me find this one, which somehow, even though there isn't water in the image, seemed to fit the words exactly. So those are samples of what we put together, and I now have a book that has been given to family and friends, and it's been an extremely empowering experience. And I have to say thank you.
Thank you, Lori. We understand how much you miss him.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Our next written memoir is entitled Regrets. It's by Virginia Ariga, if I've pronounced it correctly, and it will be read by Stephanie.
My Two Regrets in Life by Virginia Ariga. My first regret was about the famous March to Washington, which happened on August 28, 1963 in Washington, D.C. Eiko Suzuki, Mr. Warnock, and I were sightseeing there a day before. We all saw the preparations for the march, including setting up the stage at the Lincoln Memorial. Many police were walking around, roping the route from the Washington Monument. I remember seeing many portable toilets along the way. The car radio said there was one police officer for every 3 participants. The security was tight. Mr. Warnock warned us not to stay in the city the next day, for there might be a riot. To my regret, I followed his advice, and early the next morning, I left the city by bus to New York. Mr. Winburn Thomas's secretary met me at the bus depot, who came from the Presbyterian Church's headquarters. The first thing she asked me was if I had walked the march. I said no. She said the majority of the staff from her office went by chartered buses to attend the rally. While I was in the building having coffee, the people came back from Washington, excited, and told me about the peaceful march. All Black and white people marched without any incident, and the Lincoln Memorial was packed with people and no riot. I have a program which says, March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I had lost the opportunity of hearing Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech, I Have a Dream. I missed this remarkable ecumenical civil rights demonstration, which started with the national anthem by Marian Anderson, a world-famous singer in the 20th century. I was so ashamed of myself that I could not tell this incident to anyone until quite recently. My second regret. I witnessed on TV the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in El Paso, Texas. In fact, JFK came to El Paso on December 2nd, 1962, on the way back from Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. And I saw his motorcade passing in front of me while I was at the front porch of my friend's house. JFK's face was suntanned and pink, exposed to the strong December sun of New Mexico and Texas, waving to us nonstop. It was a very warm day. On November 22nd, 1963, almost a year later, I watched TV news at home when Jackie and JFK arrived at Dallas Airport. Jackie received a bouquet of roses around 11 a.m. El Paso time. Dallas was 1 hour ahead at noon. I switched the TV off and went back to my study. About 40 minutes later, a phone call came from my friend, who said that Kennedy was assassinated. I turned the TV on, and for the next 3 days, I was glued to the television, crying. I wrote an emotional letter to my parents in English, reporting in detail what was happening in Texas and the United States. My father told me later that if I had written that letter in Japanese, it was a big scoop, and that he could publish it in his newspaper, the Asahi, the biggest newspaper at that time in Japan. There were no reporters near Texas nor in the West Coast from his office, and the first-hand report was precious. The Japanese reporters had to go there from the East Coast, New York, and Washington. They arrived in Dallas days later because all the media wanted to go there as quickly as possible, and not many flights were available. Too bad that I had missed being an instant reporter. I was very emotional, and it was easier for me to write in English at that point. I remember writing more than one letter in English during this ordeal. One tiny consolation as a journalist daughter is that I still keep copies of the major newspapers reporting his assassination and have a memorial edition of Life magazine in my possession. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we have Carolyn MacArthur with Beauty Pageant Day.
Okay, sorry. My computer skills aren't great. Today, I'm pleased to share a segment of New Neighbors Part 3 from a series of memoir stories that I wrote about my childhood adventures. Beauty Pageant Day. I was fascinated by the beauty pageants that my cousin Bob and I watched annually on TV. After much phone discussion with Bob and Janet, who was on my phone party line, who often listened into our conversations anyhow, we decided to run our own competition. We agreed that the following Wednesday was the perfect day for our beauty pageant since it was the 5th week of summer vacation, and we were sure that mothers in our neighborhood would happily let their daughters participate in our contest because they were so tired of hearing "I'm bored" from their unimaginative offspring. We made a list of all the things we would need to make our beauty pageant a big success. I possessed a big bag of dresses that family and friends donated to Mom so I could play dress up. Not every kid was so lucky. It was unlikely that the Nadeau girls had bags of anything old since space was at a premium in their crowded house, and Mrs. Nadeau, a known neatnik, wouldn't allow dust to settle, let alone keep bags of used, outdated, ill-fitting clothing. I would lend Carol and Brenda dresses and accessories that were both suitable and flattering, as I wanted every contestant to have an equal advantage so our contest would be fair. I had already picked my favorite dress from the bag of wrinkled garments. It was a lovely mauve crepe that once belonged to our dear family friend, Mrs. Bunting, or Button, as I lovingly called her. Button, a short, buxom woman, was as wide as she was tall, often wore this dress when she came to visit. The dress would look quite nice on me once I gathered the extra fabric of the plus size dress around the back of my petite frame and secured it with a belt. The folded material would act as a train, giving my gown extra pizzazz. The gaping bodice that fit snugly on Button's large bosom hung loosely on my pre-adolescent body. It would need to be secured with an eye-catching rhinestone brooch. "We will need flowers for the winter, won't we, Bob?" I asked. "I have the flowers looked after." "Do you like roses and carnations?" Bob asked, knowing very well that I would squeal in delight. "Roses and carnations," I screamed into the receiver, not disappointing Bob. "But how and from where? We don't have any money. I can ask Mommy, but..." Bob jumped in. "Larry and I will stop at the cemetery on the way to your house. There is sure to be lots of fresh flowers available." "Oh," I added after a long pause. I was remembering the corsages that Bob made for Mom and Aunt Clara when they were going to a dinner dance. Mom wouldn't say anything to hurt her nephew's feelings, but silently she cringed at the notion of wearing a corsage made from cemetery flowers, no matter how nice they looked or how thoughtful the gesture. The corsage made it as far as the car that night, but never did see the light of the banquet hall. "That would be really nice," I continued, trying to get back my enthusiasm. Bob was older than I was, a teenager, in fact, having just turned 13 on his last birthday. No matter what I thought or what the trepidations I had about the source of our flowers, I bowed to his judgment. After all, the best I would be able to come up with were a few flowers snatched from my dad's greenhouse or weeds from our backyard. So that's part of it.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Next, we have Kate O'Grady, and she'll be reading Robert Phillips' work entitled Immigration and Canada's Future.
Hi, I'm presenting for Robert today. Robert chose the story for this because he felt that it would inspire others, and it supported the theme of life lessons. I thought the story perfectly encapsulates the impact Robert has had on Hamilton's community. Although he won't admit this himself, he has helped many people both professionally and personally. This is reflected in me presenting his memoir today because he thought that my presenting would encourage me to continue to be successful in academics. So I was very thankful for that. And this is the excerpt. About 12 to 15 years ago, my wife Ruth and I were involved with a mentorship program helping recent immigrants to settle in Canada. The most recent of the 4 families we were involved in was Ariel, a registered nurse from Beijing, China. She married a Canadian boy and they bought a family on the West Hamilton Mountain. They now have 2 young children, and Ariel's mother and father are visiting with a family and looking after the children while Ariel and her husband are working. Around the same time, we helped a couple from Colombia, Gloria and Hector, who are now well established in Canada and Hamilton. They are both university graduates who now have jobs, a car, a house, and live with their 2 children in Ancaster. The family we helped prior to this was a family of 3 from Mumbai approximately 15 years ago. In the early years, they rented apartments, and more recently, they bought a townhouse on the East Mountain. The son, Emil, who attended Barton Secondary School, recently graduated with his BA from Sheridan College. They became Canadian citizens about 10 years ago and all attend Trinity Presbyterian Church on the East Mountain. The first family we helped in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution was a family of 5. We met them when they were renting a condominium unit that we owned in downtown Hamilton called the Durand. The husband had been a member of the Shah's National Guard. We have lost touch with them now, but the oldest boy graduated from university in the United States, and the middle girl graduated from Sir John A. Macdonald and McMaster in Hamilton. I'm not sure what the youngest boy ended up doing because he had just started high school at Sir John A. Macdonald when we lost touch. Helping these families was an honor of ours. They taught us a lot about what it means to be a community and helping each other. All of the families we helped are thriving now, and hopefully our contributions to their lives enabled them to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Our next presenter is Linda Benson with her writing entitled Memoir Synopsis.
Hello. Before I start reading, I'd like to say thank you to my student collaborator, Haley Hoffman, for all your hard work, Haley, and hours of editing. Thank you. And so Haley submitted the last part of the bio, which is entitled the synopsis, memoir synopsis. So I'll start now. Wow. 58 years have gone by since my maiden voyage to Australia. I don't think one ever forgets such a momentous occasion, especially at such a young age. Being just 12 years old, not yet a teenager, but not quite a child, I was most impressionable and naive about the world around me. I will never forget this 6-week journey, as it was the beginning of my restlessness. I knew after this moment I would never settle again. I had a desire to discover lands unknown to me. I was motivated and propelled forward by the curiosity that was mounting within me. I had a passion for other cultures. I wanted to understand their way of life, learn their language, and see how they related to one another, as well as what made so many people different. What did they dream about? What made them who they are? And the meaning behind their rituals and mystic rites of passage. I had so many questions, a thirst that could not be quenched. I couldn't help but wonder, was this restless feeling deep inside me because of that first voyage, or did it happen much earlier on when I was placed for adoption at the age of 2? I'll never truly know the answer. All I know is that my life without travel would have been most boring. And although I am in my 70s now, I am not done. Maybe my body would tell you otherwise, but my mind still wanders to territories unknown. I know that my love of travel has been instilled in my children, and hopefully will be in my grandchildren too. During the time that I was raising my own children, I became a host parent, sharing my home with youth and teachers from many diverse cultures. This experience helped further my love, my respect and acceptance of our world's inhabitants. I surrounded myself with friends from all walks of life, from all faith backgrounds, and from all gender identifications. How has this impacted my life so far? This would take too long to answer, too many layers to unpeel. All I can say in such a brief statement is that I am who I am because of my travel experience. It has rewarded me in many ways by providing me with a wonderful network of culturally diverse friends, the love of many languages, and the love of life itself. The love of travel has also helped to shape my career path. After being declined the chance to become an airline stewardess due to my short stature, I pursued a career in nursing instead, which luckily led me to visit other countries around the world. I have become a much more resilient person through travel. It has allowed me to be more courageous, independent, curious, adventurous, spontaneous, and I do not fear asking questions. I have never felt alone when traveling. In fact, the best experiences have been in solo travel. If I was starting my travel life in 2021, I'd probably not take as many risks. I'd definitely plan more, and I'd leave my agenda and my contact information behind and be more aware of those around me. However, I wouldn't be who I am and life wouldn't be as exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Barry Spinner is our next reader with Growing Up.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I was just going to introduce Barry. So
Okay.
Barry is my memoir partner, and today he will be reading a section of this memoir about the early parts of him growing up, and then it's called Growing Up. So take it away, Barry.
Kelsey. I'd like to thank Kelsey for her diligent work and helping me record some elements of my life. I'm going to read from text that she has written. I was born in a Toronto hospital in 1947, a classical baby boomer. Also, I was the firstborn. My parents were quite poor during the Depression and before the war. They were typical working class. However, their resolution of this typical situation was quite atypical. Reflecting upon my early childhood, although my parents struggled to make ends meet, they hid the factors of poverty away from me and my younger brother. It wasn't until later in life that I realized with much empathy the struggle they had endured. However, a memory that I recalled and now understand better to represent their living in poverty was when my mother was paying utility bills by mail. Living from paycheck to paycheck, money was extremely tight. So when she got down to paying the bills, she would sometimes purposefully mess up the information on the check so that they would have more time to pay the bill. This is called kiting. When she sent the incorrect payment information, it would take a few days to reach its destination. So when it came to paying the bill, the utility company would need to call her to inform her that the information was somehow incorrect. Quelle surprise. This prolonged the allotted payment time to the family's advantage. Another matter which affected me much more than kiting was how often we moved. While we were living in poverty as I was growing up, we moved often, always driven by rent levels, them seeking to pay less rent or be in a place where they could get by and low rents. As well, they relocated when we started going to school, and overall we moved 4 times between 1947 and 1955, from downtown Toronto to Port Credit to Scarborough, always positioning ourselves on the Grey Coach Lakeshore bus route so my father could commute to downtown Toronto. And then later we moved to Vancouver and then to different areas of Etobicoke before my parents bought their one and only home. As the Spinner family grew, so did the number of places we lived in. During the commotion of them trying to support the family, my father attended the University of Toronto to earn his bachelor's degree and eventually his doctorate, so that he would be able to support his family and make their way out of poverty. He got his university engineering degree from 1947 to 1951, and some Torontonians might recall a place called Cocky College, which was where veterans of the war, he was one, went to get their first year of university. It's where the spy school had been in Oshawa. This activity of university allowed him slowly but surely to get a stable job and support our family for a safe future. As he was an extremely intelligent man and a workaholic, to say the least, he was able to achieve just what he had set out to do. From Vancouver, in his first job, Dad was recruited by a chemical engineering professor who also became a very important life, both in my father's life and my own educational and personal pathway. However, my father being immersed in this work and being the sole breadwinner, there was a downside of him being psychologically absent from our lives. But let's save that for another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Our final presenter is Tracey D'Alessio with Dear Dad.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I couldn't hear that last speaker hardly at all. So I just wanted to check that I can hear Geraldine
Yes,
now.
I hear you.
Okay, all right. Hi, my student volunteer, Nitika, helped me put together this, this booklet or prepare it. I had most of the writing already done. I've been working on memoir writing for about 10 years. And I just didn't, I don't know, I needed a push. And this program was the push that got me to actually put it together. So I'll just flick through it quickly before I read my piece. So you can see I wanted to have lots of pictures in it to illustrate my stories. And that's what she really was able to help me do that much more easily than if I'd had to do it by myself. So anyway, the piece I chose is going to be in my next episode of memoirs. So it's called Dear Dad. Dear Dad, I'm sitting in the shadow of the tower here in Venazia, looking out over the sea, but not really seeing it. You've been on my mind all day. It's October the 2nd, 2009, exactly a year since I received the phone call from Jean, my mother, calmly stating Ranald died. You're kidding, I inanely responded, to which she replied, I'm afraid I'm not. As I stare out across the Ligurian Sea, I am reminded of so many incidents from my childhood in which you loomed large, not only because of your 6'4" stature, but also because of your extrovert personality. We are very much alike. How could we not be? I was born on your 28th birthday after all. We had a bond from early on. As my awareness of my surroundings fades, images flood my consciousness. I'm standing in the dark on the stage of the Roundtree Theatre in York, ready to perform in my annual ballet school recital. I peer through the gloom, my eyes roving across the rows in the audience until they rest on the silhouette of the tallest person, you. Lindisfarne, off the coast of Northumberland, on one of our family holidays. Do you remember charging across the beach to where Guy and I were playing, oblivious to the fact that we were being cut off by the rapidly rising tide? You grabbed us and lifted us out of the water, cavalierly disregarding your non-swimmer status. I remember as a teenager being driven to school in York by you and your impatience with the other drivers. Get out of my life and die were the two phrases I particularly recall as I watched in amazement as you feigned banging your head repeatedly on the dashboard. You never were very tolerant of others not living up to your high standards. Returning from working in London for occasional weekends at home, you would pick me up at York Station. Disembarking from the train, I cringed with embarrassment to see you in the distance, dancing about on the platform, arms waving, yelling, my Trace, when you spotted me. Now it's one of my favorite memories of you. You delivered an eloquent, engaging speech at my wedding, even if you described your oldest adult as pig-headed and obstinate to Vince and the assembled guests. You were a very entertaining speaker, and everyone laughed as you talked about the church potentially listing to the groom's side because of the amount of people in Vince's family. I've never told you that one of my biggest regrets, especially now, is not dancing together that night. The day just flew by in a blur, and before I knew it, the moment had passed. I am sorry. Vince came to know you and respect you. He still cracks up every time we think about the occasion you described the impending roadworks near your house to your soon-to-be in-law, Reverend Rathbone, as an abortion of a highway. You never were the poster boy for the politically correct movement. Do you remember all the times Maya and Emily, our children, helped you to walk the beagles when we came over from Canada on visits? When they were very, very young, they had difficulty articulating Granddad Ranald, so you became Grandold Randold. We were all aware that you were living on borrowed time after your quadruple bypass surgery. You were only supposed to receive 10 more years, but you got 17. Although I was thousands of miles away when you passed, I am comforted to know that your last moments were spent in your beloved chapel, doing everything you loved, playing snooker with your friends. I don't think you felt any pain. A footfall on the steps behind me abruptly brings me out of my reverie. A warm feeling radiates through my body, and I close my eyes and silently say, thank you for being a great dad. We all miss you, but have great memories to share with each other. Love, your Trace.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for all their readings today. At this point, Ellen wanted to make a few final comments. I think you're muted, Ellen.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you, Geraldine, for hosting today and for taking on the partnership of with the students and the seniors in the 2 terms this year. And I just wanted to read these 2 quotations. Those of you who know me know that I collect quotations. These are, I think, particularly relevant to memoir and intergenerational memoir. When individuals write their life stories, they dig deep into personal truths. When we write memoir side by side, we discover qualities we share. So in the writing of memoir, we learn to share our own very personal stories, and at the same time, learning that they resonate with universal stories. And William Carlos Williams, the poet, had this interesting way of capturing the joy of saving our experiences and reliving them through memoir. Catch an eyeful, catch an earful, then don't drop what you've caught. Get it into your memoir. Thank you.
Thank you. So in closing, I just have a few remarks. I wanted to thank you all for your generosity in sharing the most intimate and tender thoughts. The resilience, fortitude, care, and love imparted speaks volumes about what really makes life worth living. I'm sure we all have learned something this afternoon, and for many of us, our own thoughts about our own lives have been evoked. There is a wee book that was written a while ago entitled Live, Learn, and Pass It On. Certainly, we are humbled having had the privilege of our senior partners sharing with us what they have lived, learned, and now generously pass on. We want to thank everyone who participated today. It's truly been an enriching experience. And I'm sure, given our experience here today, all of us look forward, Ellen, to Memoir Fest 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Jasminder, you